Welcome to Anatomy of the Extraordinary, the podcast that unveils true, remarkable stories from the edges of human experience. I'm your host, and today we dive into another extraordinary journey.
Imagine you need to cut a hole through 50 centimeters of solid, steel-reinforced concrete.
Right, which is no small feat.
Exactly. I mean, to pull that off, you are going to need a massive industrial rig. You're going to need dozens of gallons of water to cool the diamond-encrusted drill bit.
And an immense amount of physical force.
Yeah. And more importantly, it is going to sound like a literal war zone. So imagine doing all of that directly beneath a sleeping apartment building.
In the dead of winter.
In the dead of winter. Right. For 36 hours straight. And, doing it without waking a single soul.
It's an architectural and acoustic paradox, honestly.
It really is.
Because we are conditioned to think of bank heist as fast. Fast, violent, and inherently loud. But what happened in the basement of that building, it really challenges every single assumption we have about physical security.
It completely flips the script. And the reality of this paradox, it was discovered at exactly 3:58 a.m. on Monday, December 29th, 2025.
Right after Christmas.
Yeah, the Christmas holidays had just wrapped up, so the streets of Gelsenkirchen, which is this quiet district in Western Germany, they were completely deserted.
I can picture it, just that heavy, silent kind of dark that only really exists in the dead of winter.
Exactly. And then, suddenly, an automated fire alarm shatters the quiet. And it's echoing out from this, unassuming mixed-use apartment building right in the middle of a pedestrian zone.
But this wasn't a residential fire.
No.
Beneath those apartments sat the local branch of the Sparkasse Bank.
So when the firefighters and the police arrived on the scene, the blue lights are, flashing against the brickwork. They enter the building fully expecting smoke, heat, flames, all of that.
Standard fire protocol.
Right. But as they make their way down, descending deep into the basement levels of the structure, the air actually grows cold.
Because there was no fire.
No fire at all. They open the heavy doors to the high-security vault, and instead of an inferno, they step into a scene of absolute calculated devastation.
I mean, the floor of this massive, supposedly impenetrable room was literally knee-deep in debris.
Pee-deep.
Yeah. We are talking about an estimated 500,000 individual items scattered indiscriminately across the room.
500,000 items.
Torn legal documents, empty metal cassettes, velvet jewelry boxes, family photographs, and everything, the walls, the floor, the remnants of the boxes. It was completely blanketed in this thick, chemical-smelling white foam.
So the responders are just wading through this sea of ruined lives and white sludge, and then they pan their flashlights up to the back wall.
And that's when they see it.
Yeah. In the reinforced concrete, there is a perfect, surgically precise circular hole, roughly 40 to 50 centimeters wide, just a tunnel leading straight into the adjacent room.
It was a strike right into the heart of the bank's most secure asset.
And that is the mission of our deep dive today. Over the course of a single Christmas weekend, a crew of unknown perpetrators pulled off one of the largest bank heists in modern German history.
They vanished into the night with an estimated 30 million to over 100 million euros in untraceable cash, gold bullion, and jewels.
Unbelievable. They executed an industrial-scale drilling operation. They forcefully cracked over 3,000 individual safe deposit boxes. So for this deep dive, we need to understand the mechanics of the impossible.
Right.
How does a team of criminals spend days inside a highly secure bank, running heavy machinery, bypassing every alarm, and systematically dismantling thousands of steel boxes without a single act of violence against a human being?
But to understand that, we really have to discard the Hollywood image of a smash and grab.
Okay.
Because this wasn't that. This was a logistical masterpiece. We're looking at a highly organized tactical operation that identified and exploited multiple overlapping layers of sophisticated physical and electronic defenses.
So they weren't just lucky.
Oh, absolutely not. They understood the vulnerabilities of modern security better than the bank itself did. I mean, it left the authorities completely baffled, and tragically, it left thousands of everyday citizens financially ruined in the blink of an eye.
So let's start with the geography, because the physical layout of the building is sort of the first domino to fall here.
Yes, location is everything.
Right. The Sparkasse in Gelsenkirchen isn't some isolated, standalone fortress surrounded by a moat. It's fully integrated into the city's infrastructure. It is physically connected to a public parking garage known as the Mary Enter garage.
And that integration is the foundational vulnerability. You see, the perpetrators didn't arrive in a battered getaway car under the cover of darkness.
No ski masks and shotguns.
Exactly. They arrived in two highly specific, meticulously chosen vehicles. A black Audi RS6, which is a vehicle known for extreme speed and cargo capacity, and a white Mercedes Citan van, which is perfect for hauling heavy industrial equipment.
And they didn't park on the street?
No, they drove right into the Mary Enter garage.
But they weren't exactly careless about being caught on camera, right? I mean, they were using fake license plates. And when I was going through the investigative notes for this deep dive, the mechanics of this detail really stood out to me.
Oh, the doublets.
Yeah. They weren't just stolen plates ripped off a random car. They were cloned doublets. One registered to Hanover, one to Beckham.
The gray market of license plate cloning is actually fascinating because it relies entirely on the automated nature of modern law enforcement.
How so?
Well, a doublet isn't just a random set of numbers. The criminals go out and find a clean, legally registered ID RS6 of the exact same year and color.
Oh, wow.
Right. And then they manufacture a perfect physical replica of its license plate.
Okay, so if an automated speed camera flashes them on the Autobahn, the computer system reads the plate, checks the database, sees that the plate belongs to a black Audi RS6, and registers absolutely no anomaly.
Exactly. The innocent owner in Hanover just gets a speeding ticket a week later in the mail. And the police have absolutely no reason to pull the thieves over on the night of the heist.
It's just brilliant. It's a layer of operational security designed specifically to defeat algorithms, not just human officers.
Yeah, but getting into the public section of the garage was really only the first step. The true genius of their infiltration relies on the specific tier system of the Mary Enter facility.
Right, because it goes deep.
It does. To get down to level -3, which is the lowest underground level, you need a specific digital contract. It's the Dower Parker area, restricted to long-term parkers.
So they didn't just smash a wooden barrier arm to get in?
No, that would draw attention. They either legally registered as long-term parkers using fake identities, or they cloned the RFID access protocols perfectly.
Which is crazy to think about. But the descent doesn't stop at the public long-term parking, does it?
It doesn't. Because level -3 happens to connect directly to the bank's private, restricted underground berths.
Of course it does.
And separating the public garage from the bank's private territory is a heavy rolling steel gate. To get past that, you need a highly restricted digital chip. A chip strictly reserved for bank employees, money transport services like, Brinks or Prosegur, or the residents living in the apartments directly above the bank.
And this is where the sophistication of the crew becomes undeniable, because they possessed that digital access.
You really did.
They didn't use a blowtorch on the gate. They didn't try to winch it open with a truck. They drove their heavily loaded van up to the reader, transmitted the correct digital handshake, and the gate just rolled open. They quite literally badged in.
It's the ultimate subversion of access control. You can have a door made of solid titanium, but if the computer thinks you are an authorized money transporter, the door will politely open for you.
Right. So they drive their van full of heavy equipment right under the bank, completely out of sight from the street level.
And once they were safely inside the private garage, they still had to navigate through the basement corridors to actually reach the vault area.
Which you'd think would be covered in lasers and cameras.
Well, according to the internal files from the BAO Borer Police Task Force, they moved through a fire escape door. But, again, there was no brute force involved.
No crowbars.
Nope. The door had been manipulated days or perhaps even weeks in advance. The locking mechanism was filled with silicone.
So from a passing glance by a security guard, the door looked completely flush and locked.
Exactly. But it could simply be pulled open from the outside with a firm tug.
Okay, so we have perpetrators walking the basement halls of a bank. There are no motion detectors in this specific cellar corridor, and they make their way to a very specific, mundane room, a paper archive room.
Yes. And the choice of that archive room is really the linchpin of the entire physical breach.
Right, because you might wonder why an elite crew wouldn't just attack the massive circular steel vault door you always see in the movies.
Because the primary vault door is a technological nightmare. It is rigged with thermal sensors, seismic detectors, time locks, and massive mechanical bolts. You do not touch the front door.
Here they go around.
Precisely. Architectural security is often just a facade. The archive room happened to share a plain structural wall with the back of the main vault.
So they bypassed the multi-million-dollar steel door by simply going through the drywall and concrete behind it. But we're still talking about 40 to 60 centimeters of steel-reinforced concrete.
Yeah.
You can't just quietly chip away at that with a pickaxe.
No, absolutely not. And you can't use explosives without bringing the entire apartment building down. Nor can you use a standard hammer drill. To get through that density, you need specialized industrial-grade heavy machinery.
So what did they use?
They utilized a piece of equipment known in German as a kernbohrer, an industrial core drill equipped with a massive, diamond-encrusted circular bit.
A core drill. The logistics of just moving that tool are staggering. I mean, the rig alone weighs upwards of 40 kilograms. It's not something you just hold against the wall with your shoulder.
Oh, no, absolutely not. The drill has to be physically bolted to the floor or the opposing wall of the archive room. It operates on a strict track system.
Right.
You anchor the base, and you use a hand crank or a hydraulic feed to push the spinning diamond barrel into the concrete, maintaining constant immense pressure for hours on end.
But if I'm picturing the physics of this, you have industrial diamonds grinding against steel rebar and dense concrete at incredibly high speeds. The amount of friction generated would be catastrophic.
Oh, it would be.
I mean, the bit would heat up, warp, and literally melt itself to the wall within, 20 minutes?
Which is precisely why core drills require a constant heavy flow of water cooling. The water serves two critical purposes. First, it cools the diamond segments so they don't literally disintegrate. And second, it turns the fine concrete dust into a heavy slurry, preventing it from choking the motor.
Okay, but where do you get that much water in an archive room?
The perpetrators were brilliantly pragmatic about this. Unreleased crime scene photos show that they didn't bring in massive water tanks, which would have been heavy and conspicuous.
So what did they do?
Instead, they simply ran a standard garden hose from the sink of an adjacent women's restroom directly to their drilling rig in the archive room.
You are kidding me.
No. They weaponized the bank's own plumbing to cool their drill.
It's just an incredibly elegant solution to a heavy industrial problem. But, it still doesn't answer the central acoustic paradox for me.
The noise.
Right. How do you run a heavy industrial machine grinding through half a meter of concrete for hours directly beneath an apartment complex and nobody living upstairs hears a single thing?
Yeah.
Even with water cooling, a drill is a drill.
It is, but it comes down to the fundamental physics of the specific tool they selected. See, when we think of drilling into a wall, we usually picture a hammer drill.
Yeah, the loud, vibrating ones.
Exactly. A hammer drill relies on percussion. It violently strikes the wall thousands of times a minute while turning. That striking action creates massive acoustic noise and, more importantly, powerful shockwaves.
And those shockwaves travel.
Right. They travel vertically through the structural skeleton of the building. It essentially turns the concrete pillars into giant tuning forks.
Wow.
But a core drill does not strike. It grinds. It rotates incredibly smoothly, shaving away microscopic layers of concrete with diamond grit.
So it's a completely different acoustic profile.
Entirely. It produces a low, consistent hum rather than a violent, percussive vibration. The dense earth surrounding the basement absorbed the low-frequency hum, and the complete lack of percussion meant no vibrations traveled up the support columns to the bedrooms above.
That makes perfect sense. They chose the one tool that acts more like a scalpel than a sledgehammer.
Exactly.
But even with the right tool, and, even with the water hose, reality is messy. Things rarely go perfectly to plan. And there's a specific moment in this timeline that is genuinely terrifying to think about. Because despite all this brilliant planning, they were almost caught.
Yes. The missed opportunity, it really highlights the fatal flaw in human security protocols.
So we have to look at the timeline on Saturday, December 27th. It is 06:15 in the morning. The city is pitch black. The thieves are deep in the basement. The core drill is spinning. They are actively grinding their way through the vault wall. And suddenly, an alarm goes off.
But crucially, it is not a burglar alarm.
Right. It is a fire alarm. So if they're using water cooling, why is there a fire alarm? Is it possible the water pressure dropped, the bit overheated, and they generated a massive cloud of concrete dust that seeped under the door?
That is the leading forensic theory, actually. Even with a constant water slush, the sheer volume of material being removed, 50 centimeters deep and half a meter wide, means some fine particulate matter will inevitably escape.
And dust is the enemy of smoke detectors.
Exactly. The vault was equipped with highly sensitive optical smoke detectors. These sensors work by shooting a beam of light inside a small chamber. If particles enter the chamber and scatter the light, the alarm triggers.
And concrete dust scatters light exactly like smoke does.
Exactly. The vault sensor tripped, assuming the room was actively on fire.
So at 6:15 a.m., the automated system dials emergency services. Within minutes, the local fire department arrives at the bank. The police pull up. Even a private security guard contracted by the Sparkasse gets out of bed and drives to the scene.
A full response.
Yeah. You have trained first responders actively walking the building while the drill is literally still in the wall.
And they conduct a sweep. They go down to the basement level. They stand at a locked rolling iron gate, looking down the corridor toward the exterior of the vault area.
So they are right there.
They're right there. They shine their heavy flashlights through the bars, but they don't see any flickering flames. They don't see any smoke billowing into the hallway. So they collectively deem it a false alarm. They reset the system and they leave.
This is the part I find the hardest to accept. I mean, if I am the police and I am standing in the basement of a bank with a vault full of millions of euros and an alarm triggers from inside that vault, how do I just shine a flashlight, shrug, and walk away without physically checking the room?
It's baffling from the outside. But it happens because of a psychological phenomenon heavily studied in the security industry. It's known as alarm fatigue, and it was coupled here with a catastrophic failure of protocol.
Break down alarm fatigue for us, because from a layman's perspective, it feels like gross negligence, but I suspect it's a very human error.
It is an entirely human error. You see, modern buildings are completely overloaded with environmental sensors. Ask literally any firefighter. They respond to dozens of automated alarms a month that are just triggered by dust, humidity, or a faulty wire.
So it's the boy who cried wolf.
Systematized, exactly. When responders arrive, their brains are already primed to expect a false alarm. Their protocol is strictly environmental. Is there a fire?
Right.
So when their eyes, their primary evolutionary sense, confirm there is no visible fire, their brain simply tells them the sensor was wrong.
Even though it's a bank vault.
Right. In the security industry, the golden rule is that any alarm in a high-value zone during closed hours must be treated as an active burglary until physically proven otherwise.
But they weren't thinking like burglary detectives.
No, they were thinking like firefighters looking for combustion.
They trusted their eyes over the invisible digital trigger. And the consequence of that psychological blind spot is so cinematic. Because while the police and firefighters are standing just a few meters away, chatting, shining their lights through the gate, the thieves are likely sitting in the dark in the archive room, just holding their breath.
The psychological discipline required in that moment is staggering.
Absolutely.
If a single one of the perpetrators had panicked and dropped a wrench, or if the responders had simply demanded the security guard unlock the gate to physically check the adjacent rooms, the entire heist would have ended right there.
But the responders trusted the visual check. They left the building, and the thieves simply turned the drill back on.
It's unbelievable.
It really is. So after hours and hours of agonizingly slow grinding, and estimates say they were running that core drill for 24 to 36 hours total, the concrete finally gives way.
They pull back the massive cylindrical core of the wall, and they have a tunnel big enough to crawl through.
And once they squeeze through that 50-centimeter gap, they have breached the sanctum. They are finally inside the main vault.
Now, the pacing and the energy of this entire operation shifts dramatically.
Oh, completely.
They move from slow, methodical patience into an absolute frenzy of manual labor.
Because the clock is now truly ticking, the very first thing they have to do upon entering the vault is neutralize the internal environmental security.
And again, they rely on a chillingly simple understanding of the technology. They literally climb up and place simple adhesive tape over the lenses of the passive infrared motion detectors.
The PIR sensors. So if I'm understanding the physics of a PIR sensor correctly, it isn't actually looking for movement like a video camera would. It's looking for a sudden change in ambient heat across its grid.
Like a 98-degree human body walking across a cold 60-degree room.
Right. So by putting tape over the lens, they are just blocking the thermal signature from reaching the pyroelectric sensor inside.
Precisely. The sensor only sees the ambient temperature of the piece of tape.
That's incredibly simple.
It is. But the critical failure here on the bank's part is the lack of a tamper alarm. High-grade security sensors feature anti-masking technology. So if you cover the lens, it detects the obstruction and immediately triggers a silent alarm.
So either the Sparkasse sensors completely lacked anti-masking capabilities, or the logic board was programmed to ignore tampers when the main alarm was disarmed.
Either way, the system was completely blinded and the bank was entirely unaware.
And from there, the vault becomes a literal assembly line. The digital access logs of the bank's internal computer system tell a story of sheer, terrifying efficiency.
It's brutal.
It is. The very first safe deposit box was forcefully cracked open on Saturday morning at 10:45 a.m. The last recorded digital opening was just a few hours later, at 14:44 p.m.
In that intensely tight window of less than 4 hours, they cracked nearly 3,250 individual steel boxes.
3,250. That is roughly 95% of the entire vault's inventory.
Yes.
And I really want to emphasize the grueling physical reality of what that entails. They aren't using explosives here. They're using heavy pry bars and hydraulic spreaders.
Manual tools.
Exactly. To rip open over 3,000 reinforced steel doors in 4 hours requires an assembly line level of sweat-drenched, back-breaking manual labor.
You have to picture the choreography. You have one person systematically popping the doors, another pulling out the metal cassettes, dumping the contents on the floor, analyzing them in a fraction of a second.
Shoving the stacks of cash, the gold bars, and the jewels into heavy canvas duffel bags, and tossing the worthless documents into a pile.
They are moving at a rate of roughly 13 boxes a minute.
A minute. That is a phenomenal exertion of energy, but amidst the chaos of those thousands of broken boxes, investigators discovered a vital clue, a detail that points away from a random crew and directly toward corporate-level espionage.
Ah, yes. The untouched boxes.
Right. Around 140 boxes in the vault were left completely untouched.
And my initial thought reading that, much like yours probably was simply exhaustion. They had tens of millions of euros in the bags. Maybe their arms just gave out, or they felt they were pushing their luck on the time.
That was the working theory at the local police, too.
But the Interior Minister for North Rhine-Westphalia pointed out a deeply unsettling correlation. Those 140 untouched boxes. They were reportedly the unrented ones.
Wait. Out of over 3,000 identically faced metal doors, they specifically ignored the empty ones.
Exactly. And that statistically cannot be a coincidence.
No, absolutely not.
It points heavily toward deep insider knowledge. I mean, how could a team of external phantom thieves know precisely which boxes were actively leased by wealthy clients and which were just gathering dust?
They couldn't. It suggests they had direct access to the bank's internal client registry.
They either corrupted an employee, compromised the IT network remotely, or bought the data from a third-party contractor.
They had a map.
They did.
So they have the loot. They have duffel bags weighing hundreds of pounds, full of tens of millions of euros. The physical labor is done. The logical human instinct at this point is to flee immediately before your luck runs out. But this is where the narrative shifts from a brilliant heist into a psychological thriller.
Because they didn't flee. They stayed inside the vault to execute what police later described as a chemical battlefield.
I really want to paint the picture of this for you. The thieves are exhausted, their muscles are burning, they're surrounded by a knee-deep ocean of paper and metal. But instead of running for the van, they initiate a meticulously planned forensic counterattack.
They executed a three-pronged assault on modern forensic science. This wasn't a panicked afterthought. This was a distinct, heavily resourced phase of the operation designed entirely to paralyze the subsequent police investigation.
Let's break down those three prongs, because the level of obsessive control here is astonishing. Let's start with the biological evidence. We shed DNA, constantly sweat dripping from a brow, skin cells flaking off hands, saliva from heavy breathing.
And if you spend 4 hours doing manual labor in a room, you leave a massive biological map of your identity.
Right. So to combat that, the thieves brought in pressurized tanks of specialized chemical disinfectants.
They systematically sprayed down the entire vault. The walls, the floor, their tools, the broken cassettes. And they didn't just use standard household bleach. They used industrial oxidative agents, likely compounds containing sodium hypochlorite or heavy hydrogen peroxide.
So what does an oxidative agent actually do to human DNA? Because it doesn't just wash it away down a drain.
No, it acts on a molecular level. An oxidative agent attacks the chemical bonds of the DNA molecule itself. It chemically cleaves the nucleic acids, breaking the sugar phosphate backbone of the double helix.
Wow.
Yeah, it turns a unique biological identifier into a useless soup of disconnected atoms. It makes it fundamentally impossible for crime labs to run a PCR test and amplify a genetic profile. They literally bleached their biological footprint out of existence.
That is terrifyingly thorough. But bleaching DNA still leaves physical, tactile evidence, right? Like fingerprints on a metal box or the unique wear pattern of a shoe tread on the floor. If I am robbing this place, I am paranoid about leaving a physical print. How did they solve the tactile problem?
That brings us to the second prong, physical masking. They took standard, industrial-sized fire extinguishers, likely powder-based ABC extinguishers, and literally emptied them out across the entire expanse of the room.
And this is what created that thick, chemical-smelling white foam carpet the responders waded through.
Yes.
But the purpose of that powder isn't just to be a nuisance, right?
Far from it. The fine particulate dust from a chemical fire extinguisher is an absolute nightmare for a forensic team. First, it settles heavily into the microscopic ridges of any potential fingerprints left behind on a surface, permanently ruining the contrast needed to lift them.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, and perhaps more importantly, it blinds modern investigative technology. When a major crime scene is processed today, investigators use 3D LiDAR laser scanners to map the room perfectly. This allows them to calculate trajectories and digitally reconstruct the event.
But a laser scanner relies on light reflecting off distinct surfaces.
Exactly. When every single surface, edge, and piece of debris is coated in a uniform layer of bright, white, highly reflective powder, the light simply scatters. The 3D map becomes a useless, blooming white blur.
So they've chemically shattered the DNA and they've optically blinded the laser scanners and buried the fingerprints.
Yep.
But the third prong of this counterattack, this is the one that genuinely makes me sit back and marvel at the audacity. It is pure, targeted psychological warfare against the police.
They scattered human hair across the vault.
Handfuls of it, hundreds of strands of hair, but crucially, not their own.
No, not their own. Investigators believe the perpetrators spent the weeks leading up to the heist visiting local barbershops or hair salons across the region.
Just sweeping up the floor.
Basically. They collected clippings of foreign human hair, bagged it, brought it into the bank, and dispersed it like confetti throughout the crime scene.
Just think about the devastating effect this has on the investigative supply chain. When the forensics team finally arrives on Tuesday, dressed in full hazmat suits, they start swabbing. They find DNA. They find hair follicles.
They bag them up. They send them to the state crime lab.
Exactly. And the lab technicians spend weeks running exhaustive DNA tests, cross-referencing the profiles against European criminal databases. The detectives think they finally have a major break in the case.
Only to realize that the DNA profile belongs to a random accountant who got a haircut in Dusseldorf 3 weeks ago.
It is a tactic designed specifically to overwhelm the system. It forces the police to waste thousands of expensive man-hours chasing forensic ghosts.
And if we connect this to the broader psychology of organized crime, this tells us we are not dealing with local thugs looking for a quick payday.
No, this is next level.
We are dealing with an organization that possesses deep institutional knowledge of how modern police forces operate. They understand the bottlenecks of a forensic supply chain, and they attack those bottlenecks directly.
Which brings us to the climax of the operation, the escape. After all of this, the silent infiltration, the heavy drilling, the exhausting cracking of thousands of boxes, the chemical warfare, how do you actually walk away?
Casually. And with absolute confidence.
It is now Monday morning, 2:52 a.m. The surveillance cameras in the Marientor parking garage capture the black Audi RS6 and the white Mercedes van pulling up to the exit barrier. Their trunks are weighed down with tens of millions of euros.
And this piece of footage truly underscores their brazenness. The cameras show one masked man calmly getting out of the lead vehicle. He walks over to the parking barrier, grabs it with his bare hands, and simply forces it upward so the van can pass underneath.
Meanwhile, another suspect is seen standing at the automated machine, seemingly paying for a parking ticket.
Validating your parking ticket with 100 million euros in the trunk.
It is a surreal, almost comedic image of bureaucratic compliance in the middle of a massive felony. They drive out into the dark streets of Gelsenkirchen, and they simply vanish into the European highway system.
And it isn't until an hour later, at 3:58 a.m., that the settling dust from the drill and the chemical powder from the fire extinguishers finally trigger that second fire alarm we discussed at the very beginning.
Right.
That is when the police arrive, walk into the basement, and discover the empty vault.
But the real tragedy wasn't discovered at 3:58 a.m. in a dark basement. It was discovered on Tuesday morning. When the sun came up, the news broke, and the realization of what was lost shifted from the bank's abstract balance sheets to the citizens on the street.
Because a bank is not just an institution. It is a repository of people's lives.
The human cost of this heist is devastating. A safety deposit box represents the ultimate safety net for so many people. And you have to imagine the scene on the street outside the Sparkasse branch.
It was chaos.
Within hours of the news hitting the local radio, word spread through the city like wildfire. By Tuesday afternoon, there were over 200 desperate, terrified customers swarming the entrance.
It's freezing outside. People are crying. They're physically pushing against the police barricades. They form a chant, "Wir wollen rein, we want in."
They literally want to storm the building to see if their box is one of the lucky 140 that survived.
And the emotional weight of the victim interviews is heavy. You have people who inherently trusted the tangible physical weight of concrete walls over the digital volatility of the stock market.
We're talking about heartbreaking, specific losses. One man stood outside the police tape weeping, explaining to reporters that he had just lost 100,000 euros in solid gold.
But it wasn't just wealth, right?
No. It was the entire life savings of his parents, who had worked for decades performing brutal manual labor underground in the local coal mines.
That is just awful.
Another victim, a retiree, had just finalized the sale of his house and placed 400,000 euros in physical cash into his safety deposit box, thinking it was the absolute safest place on earth to hold it until he bought a new property.
And it wasn't just cash and gold. It was family heirlooms, generations of jewelry that survived wars, irreplaceable wedding gifts, things that possess an incalculable emotional value, completely gone, evaporated overnight.
But as journalists, we also have to look objectively at the broader economic reality of the safety deposit box system. Because when you have tens of millions of euros sitting in physical cash, locked off the grid in a basement vault, you have to ask where some of that liquidity came from.
It is an uncomfortable reality of physical banking. The Interior Minister openly acknowledged that while much of the wealth belonged to completely honest, hardworking citizens, the sheer volume of untraceable, undeclared cash raises the inevitable specter of the gray market.
We're talking about potential illicit clan money, untaxed inheritance, and off-the-books business assets.
Exactly. When you lose money that the government didn't know you had, you have absolutely zero recourse. You cannot file a police report for €500,000 in cash if your tax returns say you make $50,000 a year.
But regardless of the legal origin of the funds, what we witnessed on that street was the overnight vaporization of thousands of people's ultimate safety nets.
And the local police force quickly realized the staggering magnitude of what had just happened. They formed a massive special task force, ominously named the BAO Borer, which translates to Special Organizational Structure Drill.
It eventually swelled to 350 officers, detectives, and forensic specialists working around the clock in grueling 12-hour shifts.
And the task in front of those 350 officers was a logistical nightmare. They were faced with the impossible job of processing that garbage dump inside the vault.
500,000 individual items.
Every single torn envelope, every shattered piece of metal, every scattered photograph had to be manually cataloged, swabbed for biological residue, photographed, and bagged.
And they were doing this inside a room coated in chemical foam, knowing that the DNA they did find likely belonged to a random patron of a barbershop.
The psychological toll on those officers, sifting through the ruined lives of their neighbors, must have been immense.
And after all those 12-hour shifts, all that swabbing, what did they actually find? Did they catch them?
Almost nothing. The trail went cold almost immediately. The fake Hanover license plates from the black Audi RS6 were found discarded near the central train station in Dortmund, roughly 30 kilometers away.
Just a classic diversion tactic designed to make police think the crew had hopped on an international train.
Right. But the perpetrators themselves, the money, the gold, they remained literal phantoms.
Which begs the question, does this level of sophisticated organization exist in a vacuum, or has this happened before?
Oh, it has happened before, and the tactical lineage is clear. This heist closely mirrors an infamous crime from 2013, the Berlin-Stiglitz bank tunnel heist.
Right.
In that case, a highly organized crew spent months digging a 45-meter subterranean tunnel from a rented garage directly into the vault of a Volksbank. They also utilized an industrial core drill to breach the final wall, and they also set a massive fire inside the vault to destroy forensic evidence before escaping.
So we are not looking at isolated incidents. We are seeing a distinct pattern. We are watching highly qualified, heavily funded criminal syndicates passing down institutional knowledge, refining their tactics, and analyzing architectural blueprints.
Exactly. This is not a crew of everyday thieves. This is corporate-level organized crime, operating with the precision of a military engineering unit.
Which brings us to the legacy of this deep dive. Because while the 350 officers of the BAO Borer Task Force are hunting ghosts, the victims are turning their grief and their anger directly toward the institution that failed to protect them.
Banks.
The looming legal battles stemming from the Gelsenkirchen Heist are going to fundamentally redefine banking liability in Europe. In the immediate aftermath, the Sparkasse leadership publicly claimed that their facility strictly met the state-of-the-art for security protocols.
Which is a bold claim.
Very bold. Because victim advocates and high-powered lawyers are preparing a massive wave of lawsuits, and they are not just claiming a breach of contract, they are claiming gross negligence.
We need to unpack the legal distinction there because it is the entire crux of the outrage. If you rent a safe deposit box at a bank like the Sparkasse, you sign a standard contract. And buried in the fine print of that contract is an insurance liability cap.
And in this specific case, the bank limits their liability to a maximum of just 10,300 euros per box.
Which is absolutely insulting if you had a family heirloom worth 100,000 or $500,000 in gold sitting in that box. The bank is essentially saying, we're only legally obligated to hand you 10 grand, regardless of what you lost.
Right. So if the lawyers just sue for breach of contract, they max out at 10 grand. To break that contractual cap, they have to prove to a judge that the bank was grossly negligent.
And in European corporate law, standard negligence is essentially we accidentally forgot to lock a door. Gross negligence is a conscious, voluntary, and reckless disregard for the need to use reasonable care. It is a massive legal threshold.
But the lawyers have a mountain of ammunition.
They certainly do. The catastrophic failure of the fire alarm response, allowing responders to leave without physically checking the vault, is a glaring procedural failure. But technically, the most damning piece of physical evidence for a gross negligence claim is the apparent lack of basic seismic sensors on the vault walls.
What the German security industry calls Körperschallmelder.
Exactly, the structural vibration sensors. We established earlier that a core drill is significantly quieter than a percussive hammer drill, but no heavy machinery is truly silent. A core drill grinding through steel rebar still creates intense, high-frequency structural vibration.
And a standard, modern, state-of-the-art vault should be covered in acoustic sensors.
It absolutely should be.
A great way to think of a vibration sensor is that it isn't a microphone listening to a room. It is a spider sitting on a web. It ignores the ambient wind, but it feels the exact specific frequency of a struggling fly. Or in this case, the specific high-frequency whine of a diamond drill bit cutting into steel.
That is a perfect analogy. If those sensors had been installed and active on the walls of the Sparkasse vault, they would have detected the specific frequency of the drill within seconds, bypassing the smoke detectors entirely and triggering a silent, immediate police response.
So the fact that a crew could bolt a heavy rig to the floor and drill into the back of a vault for up to 36 hours without a single vibration alarm going off heavily suggests that the bank's definition of state-of-the-art was severely, perhaps legally, outdated.
It's hard to argue otherwise.
So as we step back and look at the broader implications, what does this heist tell us about the future of physical security? Because in this exact region of Germany, North Rhine-Westphalia, there has been an absolute epidemic of ATM bombings.
Oh yeah. Criminals driving high-speed cars over the border from the Netherlands, pumping combustible gas or solid explosives into an ATM, blowing it to pieces, and speeding away on the Autobahn.
And those attacks rely on brute force and speed. They take 2 to 5 minutes start to finish.
But the Gelsenkirchen Heist represents a terrifying tactical evolution in the exact opposite direction. Instead of a fast, violent, 2-minute explosion that relies on outrunning the police, they executed a slow, 48-hour surgical breach that relied on outsmarting the police.
It capitalized on architectural vulnerabilities, a deep understanding of digital access control, potential insider data, and unprecedented forensic destruction.
It proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that elite criminal syndicates are adapting their methodologies significantly faster than institutional security protocols can update theirs.
It is a chilling realization. The arms race between those protecting wealth and those seeking to take it has shifted from physical force to intellectual engineering. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Gelsenkirchen Sparkasse heist, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We started this hour by picturing that perfect, clean, circular hole cut through 40 centimeters of reinforced concrete. For centuries, humanity has placed its ultimate trust in the physical weight of thick concrete walls, heavy steel doors, and complex locks to protect our most valuable, irreplaceable possessions. We sleep soundly, assuming weight equals safety.
But that weight might just be a false sense of security.
Exactly. Because if a team of phantoms with a rented parking spot, a garden hose, and a diamond drill can quietly dismantle that entire paradigm of security while the city sleeps directly above them and cover their tracks with handfuls of barbershop hair to confuse the authorities, it forces us to ask a very uncomfortable question. As criminal syndicates evolve into sophisticated engineering firms, are our physical vaults truly secure against modern ingenuity? Or have we simply been banking on an illusion?
Thank you for joining us on this adventure. Until next time, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it and keep seeking the extraordinary.